Hello, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay, and welcome to a special Valentine's edition. Now, let's get the disclaimer out the way straight up. I love cooking. I do a lot of it, as you can see. I love food. I love exploring new recipes, discovering new foods, trying out new combinations. But I'm not necessarily that good at it. I can make a pretty good meal, but I'm certainly not opening a restaurant anytime soon. And so this is not to be viewed as you might view something you're watching on BBC Food. Instead, what today's show is an opportunity to have a look at Valentine's Day, which comes up this weekend, and a couple of dishes that I think might work that are pretty simple, that pair with some nice wine, and hopefully ensure that 9 months from the 14th of February, little Dan or little Daniela arrives, and I am the person to thank. So I'm doing two very simple dishes, a steak with a tiny twist, and a starter that comes to me from my sister Kate, who lives in Belfast in Northern Ireland. She's a politician, but one of the rare good sort. More importantly, she's a really good cook. She sent me this recipe. I've tweaked it ever so slightly, and I'm good to go. So the two dishes, the steak I'll do in a moment, but first up, this is real comfort food. Now, I've got a dietitian. Her name is Jade. She and her army of glamazons who run nutritional solutions are all absolutely gorgeous and completely terrifying. And this is the kind of dish they would not want me to tell you about. So I'm doing so gleefully. It is a chorizo gnocchi. Now, I love chorizo. There's a richness to it. There's that slight oiliness to it. It's food I first ate in Spain, unsurprisingly, where I don't think they eat anything but sort of this and jamon, do the Spaniards, but clearly works, and they seem to be a relatively healthy bunch. And so the dish is incredibly simple. It is chorizo picked up from my local Pick n Pay, as are all my ingredients, some torn mozzarella. Now this isn't from Pick n Pay, this is from my garden, basil. This stuff grows spectacularly. It's taken over my entire garden, so I'm using as much of it as I can. Some gnocchi. Now you can make your own gnocchi. It's not hard to do at all. Potatoes in the oven, very simple to do, but this is even simpler, and it's Valentine's Day. There are more things you want to be doing than the entire evening in the kitchen. A little bit of caster sugar, some tomatoes, olive oil. That's going to come on my steak slightly later, and some onion and some garlic. But very importantly is the wine. Now, you want to start off with some bubbles. It's Valentine's Day. It's love in the air. At least I hope it is. And so this is from Paul Rene. You might have seen them on Dan Really Likes Wine a couple of weeks ago. A little estate just outside of the CBD of downtown Robertson. Robertson just making such good Cup Classique, headlined by Graham Beck, but there are loads of terrific producers throughout the area, and this is one of them. Still very small, and they only make two at the moment, a Brut and a Brut Rosé. They do have a demi-sec, a slightly sweeter version on the way, but I've gone for the pink version, just embodying all that love that's free-flowing. And so normally I would have had a glass of this, but I've got a lot of cooking to do, a lot of filming, so I'll save that for Sunday and Valentine's Day with Mrs. Nicol, who'll polish most of it off herself if past experience is anything to go by. So instead, what I have opened is what I'm going to be having with this particular dish, and I'll explain why once it's done, but to let you see what it is some Optenhorst Chenin Blanc, some bush vine, really nice wine out of Wellington, just slightly older, so it's got a nice bit of body. You can see that colour. It's got ever so golden, yeah, big glorious mouthful of wine, and perfect for 11 minutes past 8 in the morning or thereabouts. But just before I jump into my starter, I do have my steak waiting. Now, I've discovered this recently at Pick n Pay. My mate John put me in touch with this. This is the wagyu range at Pick n Pay. Now, normally, if you're going to buy wagyu steak, you need to have had 11 PPE contracts or play Premiership football or run a rather large export business out of Colombia. But with the wagyu range at Pick n Pay, it's not inexpensive, but it's certainly a lot more affordable than a lot of wagyu is, and I've had it a few times now. It's particularly good quality. It's well worth trying. In fact, I sold this and the recipe I'm going to use to John Smith, the former Springbok captain, dashed off, phoned me the next day, absolutely loved it. He probably ate 7 times what I would, but there's an endorsement from a front row forward. We'll get to the steak just now, though. Let's first of all get straight in to a little more wine. And into the gnocchi. Now, if you've watched any of the 100 million cooking shows on television at the moment, you will probably see about 100 million different ways to chop an onion. David Higgs always shouts at me for my method, but I quite like it. Just little slices across the top, just helps you to dice it. Watch out for those fingers. So I should always have a red board. You don't see the blood quite so much. I love you like la 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 la. I made this dish once, and my wife and my kids demand it again on a regular basis. So of all things I have done in my life, probably as good as any of them is marrying into a Greek family. And that's for many reasons, partly because my wife is lovely and I'm an incredibly fortunate man, but also because I got to meet her mother. Her mother is not only amazing, and I do have a seriously cool mother-in-law, she's also as good a cook as I know. And I know lots of very good cooks. And the reason I say that is because she makes the most magnificent Greek food. And Greek food is based on two wonderful qualities. The first of those is simplicity. They don't overdo anything. They're never 100 million ingredients in a particular dish. The other thing, though, is the use of garlic. Now, I love garlic. I've got absolutely no danger ever of being nailed by a vampire, and that has only been enhanced by marrying into a Greek family. Now, if you remember that documentary, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, it wasn't a movie, it was a documentary. It was, I think it was humus that the father kept trying to use to sort everybody out, brush his teeth with, etc. Well, they use garlic even more. Garlic in ice cream, garlic in gin and tonics, garlic in absolutely anything. And there's a very simple rule with garlic and the Greeks. If you're not sure if there's enough garlic, then there clearly isn't. So this pot has got the water boiling. Make sure the water is boiled nice and well. Toss in a bit of salt, and then while that's boiling, that's for your gnocchi. Some olive oil. Now, I've married into a Greek family. I'm a big fan of South African olive oil. I've been out to Willow Creek a couple of times while I've been travelling on the Alps of Cape Epic. They make some just really good quality South African olive oil. Saves on the carbon footprint. I think my mother-in-law uses South African olive oil occasionally, which is a big sacrifice for a Greek. That's something I learned from Pete Goff-Wood, whose Kitchen Cowboys course I did many years ago. You'll often find if you throw in the garlic and the onion at the same time, and you'll probably know this already, the garlic will just start to burn slightly because it cooks a bit quicker than the onion. So toss the onion in first, and as it's starting to get that slightly translucent, slightly see-through, slightly basically Scottish look, because they are slightly see-through because they don't get much sun over there, then toss in the garlic and get that ready. And make sure that your chorizo is nicely diced as well. Now, if this was on BBC Food, they'd all be perfectly symmetrical little discs of porcine wonder. They don't need to be absolutely perfect. You're tossing them into a dish, you're mixing them all up in with loads of mozzarella, gnocchi and fresh basil, so that is absolutely fine. Now, I take a lot of inspiration from a gentleman you might have heard of, a gentleman by the name of Floyd, who always had a glass of wine in hand when cooking. I think it's an excellent approach. And in this case, South African chenin blanc. And there's just something about chenin and food. It's such a rich, diverse, dexterous wine. It's got so much going for it. And in the case of this particular dish, I'll get to that. Let's start the cooking. We'll be here all day. All right, so the onion is just starting to take, and so I'll pop in that garlic. So while that's going, the next thing to do, because you want to try and time this just about right and seem vaguely professional, is to pop your gnocchi in. The water is boiling and it is salted, and there's probably a really professional way to do this. I just don't have that, so I just simply pop them in like so. Try not to scald my hand. Voila. And gnocchi is one of the easiest dishes in the world. Now, making it yourself is not that difficult, but out of a packet, they still taste great. Toss in some pesto. I make homemade basil pesto out of the acres of the stuff I've got growing in the garden. I make a dish I really love with smoked salmon and mascarpone and spinach, but as a base sort of pasta alternative, it's really good. And being born in Ireland, dish with the potatoes in, always a winner. So the onion is perfectly coloured. I don't want the garlic to get burnt, so my chorizo, and voila, in it goes. Now the chorizo sits at the heart of the flavour, and it gives it its signature ingredient. What I'm going to do is then pop in my 2 cans of tomato. Ta-da! Oh, what's amazing is this dish is almost done. So gnocchi is ready, and it's so simple. The moment it floats to the top, it's done. So that's taken literally a couple of minutes. So you've got the chorizo cooking nicely with the gnocchi, and they're all cooked. So you're just stirring them together. But then, then comes the pièce de résistance. This is the piece that is going to have me avoiding phone calls from my dietitian Jade for the foreseeable future. It's some buffalo mozzarella, which I've just roughly torn up. It's all going to melt and give it a beautiful, rich, luscious, gooey loveliness. There's an escaping piece. If Marie Antoinette had gnocchi, this would be the dish she ate. Now, while that cheese melts and it all becomes gooey and delicious and lovely, I've got the oven on, set to about 200 or thereabouts. It's not needed for long, but it is important. And as that mozzarella melts, just one last thing I'm going to toss in, and those are my fresh basil leaves from my very own garden. Ha! I love you like la 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 la. I love you like la 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 la. I love you like la 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 la. I love you like la 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 la. So as you can see, there are molten streams of mozzarella lava weaving their way through the tomato, chorizo, and fresh basil along with that gnocchi. Look at that. Oh, ho, 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 ho. I can feel my arteries hardening, and it's lovely. So I'm just going to let that cook a touch more. And while we do that, I'm going to move this one over. Now, there is a dual reason for using this particular pot. One, because it just looks really cool. But the other is that it was a gift from my good friend David Higgs, the chef extraordinaire, television star, multiple other claims to fame. He's just obscenely and slightly annoyingly talented. But he gave me this, and he also inspired the recipe. If you've been to Saint, is Italian restaurant in Santon, you probably had the pizza, you might have had the fabulous arancini. They've got some lovely dishes. In fact, they've got a great gnocchi dish themselves, several of them actually. But what they also do, and it comes out of the pizza oven in a not dissimilar Le Creuset dish, is this giant T-bone cooked in thyme butter. It is absolutely glorious. I think it's supposed to be for 2 people, but I've had it all by myself on several occasions. So I'm doing something similar, but not the T-bone. I've opted for the rump. Probably my favorite cut is a ribeye, but it can be really, really rich. And so what I've gone with here with the wagyu is a rump steak. And again, just as the previous dish, get rid of the residual gnocchi, is very basic, so too is this one. So it's just a little bit of olive oil, which I'll pop in there. Again, my proudly South African olive oil. And not too much of it, because what I'm also going to toss in here, just in case you haven't had a heart attack from your starter, is some butter. Just before I put on the steak, let's get the final stretch done with our gnocchi. So these little ramekins both give everybody an individual portion. There's a certain elegance to everybody getting their own little dish. Certainly more elegance than there is in the way in which I dish them up. Well, that's all right. It's Italian food. Italian food is meant to be messy. Kind of like eating ribs. You're not supposed to come out of it all clean cut. So the dish done simply, and then I'm just taking a little bit more of this mozzarella and just sprinkling it over the top, just for a last little touch, and popping that into the oven and just putting in that there for about 3-4 minutes. Oh. Tossing in a little garlic. I should be using fresh thyme, but I have this unfortunate habit. I cannot go to the shops and remember everything. There's always one thing I forget. Here we go. your wagyu rump. A little bit of olive oil on this because we haven't got enough already, and some salt and pepper. Oh, feel that sizzle. So the wagyu's cooking and all that butter and thyme and garlic just infusing into the meat. Oh, this has got a Valentine's success story written all over it. I'm just going to let it cook through another couple of minutes, turn it over. While we're doing that, let me introduce you to the second wine of today. So I've tried some of the Upton Hall's chenin, and I'm going to pair that with the gnocchi in just a moment, give her one or two added reasons. I've told you about the bubbles from Paul Rene, and I mentioned that I had some of this, the Sangiovese, slightly older, a 2012 from Anthony Rupert. We don't do too much Sangiovese in South Africa, although climate change, I suspect we might see a little more of this kind of hardy Mediterranean grape making its way into South Africa's vineyards. But what I'm opening with the steak is this. Now, Dani Stakler actually looks a bit like this bottle. He's about this shape, about this height. He's got broad shoulders. He's a wonderful, laughing, smiling barrel of a man. And he makes some splendid wine. This is his Cabernet Franc, which he doesn't make much of. Now, when you think of steak, you tend to think big red wine, a Cabernet Sauvignon, big red blend, Bordeaux style, Stellenbosch style. Because I'm using thyme, there's just that little bit of extra herby flavour, and it's that herbaceousness to a Cabernet Franc that can be quite pronounced, it can be quite subtle, but it is generally a characteristic of a wine that's shot to the fore in South Africa over the last couple of years, really become a wine in its own right, as opposed to playing a background role in blends, as it has done so much for so long. And so this is the one I've opted to open up to pair with my steak. And what I'm going to open it with is not a bottle opener, but a caravan. Now, if the person in your life, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your secretary, the next door neighbor whose partner's on holiday, is the person who you are attempting to woo this Valentine's Day, and they have an interest in wine, then this is the gift. It is the caravan, and it's really simple. It allows you to take wine out without spoiling the wine. There's a little gas canister in there. It refills the wine that comes out and makes sure that I can drink a glass now, and if I want, drink the next glass at Valentine's Day next year. Can't see a bottle lasting quite that long in the Nickel household, but the theory does hold. Swallow that. Oh, yeah, it's the combination of that luxurious, dark, rich red that you'd expect. It's just that little note of, yeah, sometimes it's a little feinbossy, sometimes slightly greener, but it just has that added touch of character that makes me enamored with Cabernet Franc in general and South African in particular. So I'm going to let Dani sit there, and Dani is a great man if you're eating meat, because every bottle of wine ever made at Cubstoke, no matter what it is made so as to be had with a braai. I'm not having a braai, but a wagyu steak on the grill is not too far off. Oh, that's lovely. Voila, there is a freshly cooked piece of wagyu rump. And you've seen this pretty much in real time because it does not take long at all, and that's why I've gone with this as a Valentine's dish. It's nice and easy to do, but you can then focus on having the dish, enjoying your wine, watching Notting Hill for the 17th time, and seeing where a romantic evening takes you. But you need to make sure you've got the food right. It's hard to get them wrong, really. Your biggest challenge is probably overdoing your steak, not getting that right. But most people have made a steak over time. And with this wagyu, give it a little bit of extra time, give it that butter and thyme and garlic, and I think you're onto a winner. So why have I chosen the wines I have? Well, there are so many different wines I think you could have with this dish. There are a couple of those slightly more acidic reds. I mentioned that Sangiovese from Terra del Capo. I think that would work really, really nicely. And if you're a red wine fan more than a white, then that's a great idea. Maybe a Barbara, something similar. But because the acid has been reduced by the caster sugar that I threw in a little earlier, as well as the canned tomatoes just been cooked down and broken down, and adding in that rich mozzarella and that chorizo, I really do think that this old vine Chenin Blanc is the way to go. Coleo Furi is a friend of mine. She's a fabulous winemaker, extremely gifted, makes some beautiful wine, and I think it's going to pair very nicely with this. It's oh, I mean, look at that. That's the mozzarella that's still working its way through. I probably could have cooked this slightly longer just to get that mozzarella to cook a touch more, but we were on a slight production deadline as Valentine's Day beckons. So here we go. It won't be elegant, but it should be good. Oh, that is magnificent. And it is so simple, but really good. All right, so how does it go with this? I can feel the acid of that tomato. It's not too pronounced though. The richness of that mozzarella is bursting through. And that chorizo, I was born to be Spanish. Oh. So there's enough in this wine to counter what's left of the acid of the tomato, but also to give a really good and robust riposte to the richness of the mozzarella and to that chorizo, which, having been fried, just comes through with all that lovely oiliness and all the other things that my nutritionist will frown upon. So let's see how this steak has come through. All right, possibly a little rarer than it could be. Could maybe have cooked that at maybe a touch more, but I still think it'll be perfect. So there we go. Let's give it a crack. So that butter has added another layer of richness. The thyme gives it that added savoury touch, that little nudge of garlic, which I probably almost didn't notice because I eat so much garlic, but it combines with simplicity but so much effectiveness, and only asks one last question. What on earth are we drinking? Well, you know what we're drinking because I've opened it up already. All those do pair together beautifully. It is hand-in-glove stuff, and a particularly well-fitted velvet glove at that. Now on top of it, add your mashed potato, throw in some asparagus, go for some slim fries if you want, maybe some just some blanched vegetables if you feel like this is rich enough for you. You don't need anything more with it. Completely up to you, as is the wine selection. That's what I'd like to leave you with as we head into our Valentine's weekend, but also the continuing wine journey that we're all on, no matter what level of wine experience, wine drinking we have behind us. And that is that you can really drink anything you want. If I wanted to swap these two wines around, if they work for you, that's absolutely fine. And it is one of the beauties of wine. You can discover so much in a bottle of wine by pairing it with different types of food and breaking free of the fairly strict parameters that have traditionally held in terms of what we're supposed to drink and eat together, and instead just have some fun, play around. It won't always work perfectly, but you might get pleasantly surprised from time to time. So your chorizo gnocchi with mozzarella, bit of fresh basil, and a fresh rump from Pick and Pay. There we go. I think mine almost looks like the one on the picture, so I think I've done that pretty well. So there we go. Enjoy your Valentine's Day. Hope it's a great one. I know it's a difficult time for so many people, but hopefully a little love this weekend, some good food and some good wine puts a spring back in your step and bodes well for the rest of the year. See you next week. Goodbye.